Have you ever felt that after so much light, only emptiness remained? Maybe no one has told you this, but spiritual awakening isn't always a relief. Sometimes it tears you apart. Sometimes it leaves you alone, in silence. And it is in this silence that the soul screams. But he shouts softly. Almost no one hears him. Rumi said, "You are born with wings. Why choose to crawl through life?" But he also knew, true flight requires dying in the sky. And when you start dying to what is no longer there, what is left? Empty. The void that has no name. The emptiness that comes after healing, after crying, after light. That emptiness that no one warned would come. The one that takes you by surprise when everything seemed resolved. You did everything right. You moved away from what was hurting you. You have surrendered yourself to your spirituality. You trusted the process. And yet, something seems missing. As if the universe had given you an answer, but written in a language you don't yet understand. Maybe this video is exactly what your soul has been waiting for. Because here, we don't run away from the dark. Here, we learn to listen to him. You feel this because you are going through a portal, and portals are lonely. They tear out what no longer fits, and leave you empty, so that something new can be born. But I know, you don't want to hear about rebirth anymore. You want an explanation. You want relief. You wonder why, after so much light, what surrounds you now is only this heavy silence, this spiritual vacuum, this feeling that the soul is floating, without destination, without form, without ground. Are you failing? Have you lost what you have achieved? Was awakening just another illusion? No. What you feel is not failure. It's transition. It is a sacred cycle. It's the soul coming home. But the way back always starts from the void. And that's what Rumi was talking about. Between the lines. Not in the poems of light, but in those where he whispers with pain, with renunciation, with silent faith. Because only those who have experienced emptiness understand the value of silence. And what nobody tells you is that spiritual emptiness is not absence. It is pure presence. It is the soul without distractions. It's when everything that was noise disappears, and what's left is you, true, real, unavoidable. If this scares you, it's because the ego still tries to interpret with logic what can only be understood with the heart. But the truth is simple, and that's why it's so scary. After the light comes the void, and only after the emptiness comes the real you. You feel it, don't you? This silent break, this feeling that the world goes on, but you stopped, as if the soul was pulling you in, as if something was being ripped out. But it wasn't pain, it was purification. Maybe what you feel right now is exactly this, the purification of the soul after the light, the necessary emptying, spiritual cleansing, a sacred pause. And maybe deep down, you already know, but you need to hear it again. You need to feel someone telling you, you are not broken, you are in process, you are crossing the desert before you find the oasis. Rumi wrote, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." But what happens when there is no more wound and no more light? What's left? Silence, empty. And that's when the soul starts to speak to you. In truth, no noise, no interference. Can you feel it? That call that is between the lines of your pain? This space where nothing exists, but everything transforms? Then stay. Listen. Feel it. Because now, it is in the void that you will begin to understand what you were never able to explain. Now let's talk about the pain that no one sees, and why it appears just when everything seemed resolved. Because perhaps, at this moment, you are feeling exactly that. A tiredness that is not physical. A silence that is not peace. A loneliness that is not absence, but an echo of your own soul asking to be heard. You gave yourself. You healed yourself. You tried to be strong. And yet, there is still this emptiness, this feeling of not belonging, as if the world no longer fit you, and at the same time, nothing new had yet been revealed. That's what we're going to talk about now. About this invisible pain that appears when the soul is between worlds. About that feeling of being suspended between what you were and what was yet to be born. If this has touched you, if these words have found a place within your silence, write here in the comments, "I am in the void, but I keep listening to my soul." This commentary is more than words, it is a ritual. It's you saying, "I recognize where I am, and I accept to continue. And before you continue, remember something essential. This channel is not just about videos, it's about encounters. It's about spiritual memories, it's about touching what no one sees. So if you feel like this content speaks to you, leave your like now, not just to support, but to send a message to the universe. I choose to delve deeper. Subscribe too, because each video is a key. And sometimes all the soul needs is the right key at the right time. Now yes, let's go deeper. Have you ever felt that even after a spiritual awakening, something inside you remains empty, as if after the light, only silence remained? Perhaps you did everything you were told to do. You read the right books, meditated, silenced the world around you, abandoned what hurt you, cut ties with everything that no longer vibrated like you, and yet within you, an echo remains. A silence that isn't exactly peace, but isn't pain either. A strange space where things don't hurt, but don't heal either. Where nothing screams, but everything seems absent. It's as if, after so much searching, so much surrender, so much faith, you've arrived in a place where there's no one to welcome you. A spiritual desert, a no man's land between what was suffering and what should be fulfillment. And this, for those on the spiritual path, is confusing, frightening, demoralizing, because no one prepared you for what comes after. They spoke of the pain of the soul, they spoke of awakening, but they forgot to mention that often the post-awakening is more silent than glorious. That sometimes there's no celestial music. There's a dry silence, a space where you no longer feel a sense of belonging to who you were, but also haven't yet found where you're going. Maybe you're exactly at that point, where old bonds no longer make sense, but new ones haven't arrived yet, where your soul can no longer stand superficial conversations, noisy places, shallow relationships, but also hasn't yet found a place where it can rest in peace. And this isn't a mistake. This isn't a sign that something has gone wrong. This is the crossing. And the crossing is always lonely. No one can cross for you. The pain you feel now isn't from something external. It's not because life has left you. It's because your old self is leaving, and the new one is still being born. It's the gap between two lives within the same existence. And this gap hurts, because it's like losing an identity without having a new one to wear. You feel as if you're naked before life, without a label, without definition, without a shield. Everything you used to protect yourself, beliefs, certainties, masks, has fallen. And now, only you are left, raw, vulnerable, unknown even to yourself. The emptiness you feel isn't a lack of spirituality, it's an excess of it. It's when the ego no longer has anything to hold on to, and the soul is still learning to sustain its own light. Because yes, the light weighs, the light demands. The light demands silence, presence, surrender. And when you have nowhere left to run, when there are no more distractions, no more pain to justify your behaviors, all that's left is you, your essence. And facing your own essence is the most solitary act there is. So perhaps you now feel like you can no longer fit in the places that once welcomed you. That conversations that once seemed profound now sound shallow. That the connections that once fulfilled you are now nothing more than noise. It's just that you've changed. And the world doesn't know it yet. Your energy field has shifted. Your internal frequencies are recalibrating. But the world doesn't immediately follow suit. There's a delay between internal transformation and the external reflection. And this gap is what most people can't handle. That's why many go back, try to fit back into the old forced connections, relive pain, just to avoid feeling the emptiness. But you don't have to. You can resist the urge to go back. You can learn to breathe within the void. Because emptiness isn't absence, it's fertile ground. It's clean soil ready to receive the seed of your new life. But it's silent, yes, because what's about to be born now needs space. And that space only exists when everything that was before is no more. This is where you begin to realize that awakening isn't the end. It's the beginning of a new journey. A journey where you'll shed everything that was illusory until only the essential remains, only the real, only the soul. And the soul, when it finds this empty space, doesn't scream. It listens. It hears what you've never been able to hear with so much noise inside. It hears its own truth. It hears the sacred that inhabits the silence. But to hear it, you need to cross over, not run away, not try to fill it, not try to return. And maybe that's why you feel this way right now, like you're between worlds, neither there nor here, neither dark nor light, neither lost nor found, just in suspension, on pause, on hold. But this waiting is sacred, because it's in this waiting that you rebuild yourself in silence. It's in this waiting that you begin to discover that you don't need immediate answers, that you can exist, even without knowing where you're going, that you can breathe, even without understanding what you feel, that you can simply be, without needing to explain yourself. And that's the closest anyone can get to being free. Now tell me, did this make sense to you? If it touched some silent place deep within your soul, write in the comments, "I am between worlds, but I move on." This phrase, written by you, is a reminder, a symbol that you understand that you are in a strange place and that you are not alone. Because even in the void, there are those who walk with you. You've come this far carrying the silence. And now perhaps you're beginning to realize that this emptiness that frightens you isn't a punishment, but a process. A sacred, painful, transformative process. Most people believe that spiritual awakening is the end of pain, as if it were the final stage of the journey, as if, after waking up to the truth, everything becomes light, illuminated, simple. But Rumi warns us with wisdom that spans the centuries. True emptiness doesn't come before the light. It comes after. It arrives when the soul no longer struggles against what is, when it surrenders. And in surrendering, it begins to shed its ego. It's precisely at this point that many lose their way, because everything you used to define yourself begins to crumble. Your name, your certainties, your roles, your defenses, your attachments, everything begins to unravel. And it doesn't hurt because it's wrong. It hurts because your ego is collapsing. It's being unmasked. It's being illuminated. And no illusion can withstand the light. That's why the emptiness weighs heavily, because it's accompanied by a silent mourning, the mourning for everything you thought you were. And this is deeper than any pain you've ever felt. You are not lost. You are letting go of what was never you. You are letting die what the world taught you to be, to finally give birth to what your soul has always been. And this birth is preceded by the symbolic death of the ego. Not a literal death, but a dissolution of the internal structures that sustained you. A collapse of the masks you didn't even know you were wearing. A breakdown of the control you believed you had over life. And the ego doesn't give up control without a fight. It screams. It kicks. It tries to convince you that you're wrong, that you're falling, that you're losing everything. But the truth is different. The truth is that you're being emptied so that you can be truly filled. You're being dismantled so that something more authentic can be rebuilt. And this space between collapse and reconstruction is what we call spiritual emptiness. The silence you feel is not absence. It is pure presence. It is the soul taking the space that was once the ego's. It is the essence taking command. But the essence doesn't shout. It whispers. And to hear that whisper, you must learn to stay. Stay with yourself. Stay in discomfort. Stay in the absence of answers. Stay in suspension. The ego wants to understand everything. It wants to name, control, explain. But what's happening to you now isn't meant to be explained. It's meant to be lived through. It's a living, raw, mystical experience. And that's where many return, because they want rational answers for something that can only be understood with a silent heart. And maybe that's why you feel this restlessness, because part of you still tries to return to what was, still tries to seek solace in the old, still wants to fill this void with something familiar. But this is the invitation. Don't return. Stay. Let what is dying die, and allow the new to come in its own time. Rumi said, you have to keep breaking your heart until it opens. And that's what emptiness does. It breaks the closed heart of the ego so that the soul can blossom. The heart that's breaking now isn't destroying itself. It's opening. It's opening to something you don't yet know, but when it arrives, you'll make sense of it all. You feel like you're losing your footing, but it's your ego that's crumbling. And the soul doesn't need a footing. It needs surrender. It needs space. It needs silence. Because it's in silence that it begins to teach you, not with words, but with presence, with sensations, with a wisdom that doesn't pass through the mind, but settles in the body. And at this point in the journey, you begin to realize that not all pain is negative, that not all emptiness is absence, that not all failure is failure. Some falls are liberations. Some silences are invitations. Some voids are doors. Doors that only open when you stop trying to understand and start simply feeling. This is where you are now, a place between the end of the ego and the beginning of the soul, between deconstruction and rebirth, between the scream and the silence, between the search and the encounter, a place few have the courage to remain. But you are here, and that says a lot. So, if this moment is consuming you, if you feel like you're amidst emotional wreckage, unable to name what you're feeling, know that this is part of the journey. The soul is freeing itself, and all liberation requires leaving something behind. Sometimes it's pain, sometimes it's attachment, sometimes it's identity itself. And there's nothing wrong with not knowing who you are right now. It's a sign that you're leaving room to truly discover yourself. And this discovery doesn't happen in a rush. The soul doesn't work with urgency. It works with depth, with mystery, with truth. So allow yourself to not know. Allow yourself to feel without naming. Allow yourself to fall, if necessary. Because what will be born after this will be much lighter, much truer, much more you. And if you've made it this far listening to me with an open heart, tell me in the comments, I'm letting my ego fall. This phrase is a reminder to yourself. It's an anchor, a symbol that, even without understanding everything, you choose to move forward with courage. Because sometimes all the soul needs is your permission to keep going. You've come this far with an open soul, perhaps still with a broken heart, perhaps already more aware that what hurts now is not destruction, but reconstruction. There's something no one told you, and that almost no one understands on the spiritual path. Emptiness is not the end of the light. Emptiness is the womb of the new you. And when I say this, I'm not using pretty metaphors to console you. I'm speaking the raw truth that the soul recognizes when all that was noise falls silent. What you feel now, this absence, this silence, this inner territory where nothing makes sense, is the most fertile ground there is. But the mind doesn't understand this. The mind wants to fill. It wants to explain. It wants to resolve. The mind can't bear mystery, and the void is a living mystery. It's a place where the senses don't function as they once did, where logic dissolves, where certainties die one by one, and so the ego screams. It tells you that you've failed, that you've regressed, that you're lost. But the soul begins to listen, silently, but firmly. It begins to whisper truths that were hidden beneath layers and layers of emotional distractions. You're not collapsing, you're in transition. Your soul is entering a new cycle, and this cycle demands silence, because it's in the silence of emptiness that the soul begins to hear what it previously ignored. The deepest voices of your existence don't shout, they whisper, and only in emptiness can they be heard. Only when the world stops, only when you stop, only when there's nothing left to control. Therefore, emptiness is a sacred stage. It's a temple you build within yourself, not with walls, but with absences. And within this temple, you begin to see who you truly are, without roles, without desires, without disguises, without the need to prove yourself to the world. And it is at this point that true healing begins, because healing doesn't come from rational understanding. Healing comes from silent acceptance. From looking at the void and no longer trying to escape it, but sitting within it. From respecting the time the soul needs to reorganize itself. You are not broken. You are being silently reorganized. You are being remade in a frequency your mind doesn't yet understand but your soul already recognizes as home. And this reorganization happens from the inside out. It's unhurried. It doesn't reveal itself in grandiose ways. It doesn't scream. It just happens. Like the blossoming of a seed that spent months in the dark believing it was buried when in fact it was germinating. And that's how you are now, in germination. Every silence you face is a call within. Every disconnection you feel is a chance to reconnect with something deeper. Every painful absence is a space opening for something new to arrive. But this newness doesn't arrive wrapped in euphoria. It arrives like a sigh after a long wait. It arrives with the lightness of someone who doesn't need to prove anything. It arrives when you stop trying to fill and start to simply be. The soul doesn't want you to understand everything now. It wants you to stay, to trust, to surrender. because this is the spiritual secret that few have the courage to accept. Emptiness is not the end. Emptiness is the beginning. It's where everything is born. It's where truth reveals itself. It's where your essence begins to breathe without fear. And no matter how many times you've tried to leave this place before, no matter how many times you've fled, filled, accelerated the process, now you know. Now something inside you is ready to stay. And staying isn't about settling. Staying is about trusting that what's silent today is preparing to blossom tomorrow. Rumi said, "Don't turn away from what breaks you. That's where the light enters. And if now there's no more pain that breaks you, but only this silence that seems endless, perhaps it's because you no longer need a rupture. You need presence, listening, surrender. The soul has already understood. Now it's your turn to accept that emptiness isn't punishment. It's transition. It's preparation. It's a stage where the ego doesn't survive, but where the soul finally begins to live." If you feel like you're in that place right now at this very moment, where nothing screams anymore, where everything seems to have stopped, where you can't go back to the way things were, but you still don't know how to move on, write in the comments, "I am blooming in the dark." This sentence is more than a comment. It's a choice, a silent confirmation that you understand, that you no longer need to run, that there is strength in remaining, because there is power in the void, and your soul has already begun to hear it. Maybe you've been through a breakup, not just the end of a relationship, but the end of a phase of your life where everything you knew, everything that felt right, reliable, constant, simply fell apart before your eyes. It could have been the end of a bond, a long-held friendship, a belief you'd held for years, or a version of yourself that no longer made sense. And you, courageously, decided to move on. You decided to stop holding on to what hurt you. You decided to let go. And when you did, you expected to find relief, peace, lightness. But what you found was something else, something no one prepared you for. What came next was the weight of nothingness, a dry silence, a feeling of being completely cleansed inside, but also completely empty, as if everything had been taken away, and nothing had been put back in its place yet. And it was in that exact moment, in that space between what you were and what was to come, that you began to doubt whether you'd done the right thing. Because what was once pain was at least familiar, but what presents itself now is strange. It's frightening. It's a kind of absence that doesn't hurt, but also doesn't fill, as if your soul had stopped halfway, waiting for something you can't yet name. This moment, this pause between two versions of yourself, is where many get lost. Because there's no manual, there's no explanation, there's no immediate reward. There's only this clear field, where everything false is gone, and what's true hasn't yet manifested. You feel like you no longer belong in your old places. Familiar faces no longer evoke the same feeling. Repeated words no longer resonate the same way. What once made sense now seems distant, artificial, soulless. And then, loneliness hits. But it's not the loneliness of being alone. It's the loneliness of being alone with yourself, with your own presence, with your soul bare, without distractions, without noise, without protection. And that's where the test begins. Because the mind will tell you to go back. It will try to convince you that what you left behind was better than this nothingness you're experiencing now. You'll want to run back to old patterns, to incomplete affections, to the cycles you've already broken. But the soul doesn't return. The soul only knows how to move on, even if it's in silence, even if it's in the dark. Perhaps you've recently undergone a major healing, the kind that forces you to face everything you've been hiding from yourself, the kind that breaks down the armor of pride, that deconstructs attachment, that reveals the origin of your pain with disconcerting clarity. You cried, wrote, meditated, isolated yourself, immersed yourself in profound processes, and just when you thought you were finally free, nothingness came, as if all the healing effort had swept away the inner field but left no trace. And this clean field, sacred as it may be, is also frightening, because it's a space where anything can be born, but nothing has yet been born, and the mind wants results. It wants guarantees. It wants fulfillment, but the soul doesn't want fulfillment. The soul wants space, and this space you're feeling now is exactly that, preparation for the new. Not new as distraction or replacement. New is truth. New is a version of yourself that no longer depends on the old to exist. A version of yourself that doesn't need external confirmation, that doesn't seek approval, that isn't afraid of silence. It's in this silence that the soul begins to separate noise from essence, and it's at this point in the journey that you begin to realize how much you've lived, surrounded by things that only took up space, words that held no weight, relationships that had no roots, connections that only seemed deep, but sustained nothing in the moment of the abyss. And now, with this clear field, you no longer accept what doesn't vibrate with truth. You can no longer pretend to care about what never truly nourished you. And this, while liberating, is also lonely. Because spiritual clarity is a silent blade. It cuts through all illusion, but doesn't warn you that the cut comes with the cold. You are in this place now. The place where the old distractions are gone, but there are no new certainties yet. Where healing has occurred but has not yet blossomed. Where the soul is present, but silent. And this silence is profound. It has no form. It has no explanation. It simply exists. And in this existence, it teaches you to accept the moment as it is, without trying to rush it, without trying to escape, without trying to understand with the mind what can only be felt with the heart. The soul knows what it's doing, and this clear field is the greatest gift you could receive, because now, for the first time in a long time, you can consciously choose what you allow back in. You can choose wisely what's worth your energy. You can feel clearly what resonates with your new frequency. But to do so, you must remain here, present, steadfast, even in the void, even without promises, even without guarantees. And if at this moment something in you recognized this state, this sacred place between healing and rebirth, write me in the comments. My field is clear, and I trust in what will come. This phrase is a reminder to your soul, a way to seal this moment, to say that even in silence you are listening, even in the void you are present, because only those who bravely traverse the void are ready to receive everything truthfully. You're not falling, even though everything around you has crumbled, even though your reflection in the mirror seems more strange than familiar, even though your steps are now slower, more cautious, quieter. You're not falling. You're reconfiguring yourself. You're changing shape, vibration, skin. And every true transformation requires this moment of suspension. What feels like a pause is a restart. What feels like loss is release. What feels like silence is deep listening. Rumi said, "Become the sky, break the cup to find the wine." And this phrase carries an invitation that goes far beyond metaphor, because the ego believes the cup is all that exists. The ego clings to form, to what it can touch, to what it can name. But the wine only appears when you dare to break what contained you, when you allow the structure to crumble so the essence can spread. You haven't lost the light. The light is here. It always has been. But it is in the process of purification. It is freeing itself from what still obscures it. And this often hurts. It hurts because light isn't just beauty and inspiration. Light also reveals. It lays bare what was hidden. It illuminates the parts you tried to keep in the shadows. And in the process, it burns away everything that isn't authentic. Old stories, inherited beliefs, deep-rooted fears. Everything begins to disintegrate before it. That's why many mistake light for pain. But it's not pain. It's exposure. It's clarity. It's truth being washed from the inside out. You are at this very moment in a delicate and powerful phase of your spiritual awakening. The phase in which the soul stops screaming and begins to guide. But it guides from a more subtle place. No longer through the urgency of suffering, but through the steadfastness of silence. Silence is no longer absence, it is maturity. It is proof that you no longer need external signs to know you are on the path. You begin to trust your own vibration. You begin to realize that your energy field speaks for you, that your peace is more disturbing than any reaction, that your light, now clearer, begins to reorganize everything around you. This is the shift in consciousness, the point at which you no longer need to convince yourself of anything, or convince anyone, because something inside you is already awake enough to recognize the value of every silence, every emptiness, every new beginning. You begin to understand that you don't need to explain yourself, you don't need to run, you don't need to prove yourself, you just are, and that is freedom. The rarest freedom of all, the freedom to exist without needing approval. And here your tone changes. Your presence changes. The people around you feel it. You become more whole, even when you're silent. Deeper, even when you don't speak. More present, even when you step away. Because the awakened soul makes no noise. It emanates. It vibrates. It communicates with its eyes, with the field, with the lightness of someone who no longer fights against the flow of life. You are no longer the one desperately searching for answers. Now, you are the one who listens to questions in peace. Not because you already know everything, but because you no longer need to know everything to trust. You have traversed the chaos. Now, you are learning to inhabit the space that comes after it. You are discovering that true empowerment has no form. It is not a shout. It is not an appearance. It is a state of presence that is unshaken by what is outside. Because what is inside no longer depends on anything else. And there may still be days of uncertainty, moments of fragility, thoughts that question everything again. But now you know the difference. You know how to come back to yourself. You understand that pain is not a sign of error, but of realignment. That discomfort is merely an invitation from the soul to go deeper. That silence is not the end. It is the space where truth blossoms. And that, in the midst of it all, you continue. More aware, more firm, more you. You begin to recognize that by breaking the glass you lost nothing. You freed what was trapped. You allowed your essence to no longer be contained by forms that no longer served you. And now, you flow, even without knowing exactly where, because the soul doesn't need maps. It needs presence, surrender, listening. And it's in this state that life begins to conspire differently. Answers no longer come from outside. They spring from within. Connections are no longer forced. They are recognized. Decisions are no longer based on fear. They arise from the truth that pulses within you. And this changes everything. It changes the way you relate, how you work, how you see yourself. Because you're no longer trying to be someone. You're just being. And this being is not an idealized version. It is a being in constant movement, constantly refining, constantly listening. A being that no longer runs from the shadows, because it recognizes that even the shadows carry forgotten parts of the light. A being that no longer tries to protect itself from pain, because it has understood that pain is not the end. It is a bridge, a crossing, a call from the soul to return home. You are returning home now, not a physical home, but a vibrational home. A home where all that you are is welcome. A home where silence is sacred, where emptiness is fertile, where the light doesn't need to shine all the time, because it has already been integrated into your existence. And if this resonates with you, if you felt this silent shift has already begun within you, write in the comments, "My soul has already begun to inhabit the new." Let this sentence be a milestone, a gateway, a reminder that your light wasn't lost. It was just being purified. And now, finally, it can be truly lived. If you've made it this far, your soul has felt it. And this doesn't happen by chance. Whoever listens to the end has already begun to cross over. They no longer seek distractions, but rather depth. They no longer run from pain, but recognize it as a portal. And if you felt like you were no longer alone on this journey, subscribe to the channel. Walking with awareness is easier when we find companionship in the sacred darkness. Here, each video is a mirror, a breath of fresh air, a reminder that your pain has a spiritual language, and that your silence can also be heard. Leave your like if this message touched on something you couldn't even name, and watch the next video that is appearing on the screen now. It is the natural continuation of what began here, because after emptiness comes truth, and this journey is just beginning.